Welcome to Stoic Conversations. My name is Michael Tremblay, and today I wanted to do an episode on the 10 most important ideas or concepts in Stoicism. And the thinking behind this episode is, what are the key things you need to know if you want to really understand Stoic philosophy? So starting with somebody who maybe doesn't know anything, a total beginner, if you had to introduce a couple concepts, what is the fewest things or the most important things they would need to learn to get a really fulsome grasp of the philosophy? So that's what I'm targeting today. I've pulled out 10 of these, go through them one by one, and they'll build on each other and should provide a really good understanding of Stoicism. And so I'm interested, maybe if you're newer to Stoicism, I hope this will be a very helpful resource. If you're more experienced in Stoicism, maybe there's kind of a thought experiment of, is there anything I've missed? Is there something you think is more important than a concept I've chosen? But for my money, bang for your buck, these are the most important things you need to know to really understand the philosophy deeply. So these aren't just exercises or insightful quotes, even though Stoicism offers a lot of those. These are core concepts. All of these concepts I'm going to be talking about have Greek terms. They're things the Stoics were specifically referring to in building their philosophy, and they're the most important ones for Stoicism in my view. So with that introduction in place, let's jump into it. So number one, the most important concept, the foundation behind Stoicism, is the idea of happiness or flourishing, and Greek is Eudaimonia. So understanding Stoicism starts with understanding Eudaimonia. Ancient Greek philosophy following Aristotle argued that the goal of ethics was to become happy or flourish. This is achieve Eudaimonia in the original Greek. The ancient schools then argued about what happiness was. For the Epicureans, this was the maximization of pleasure and the minimization of pain. For the skeptics, it was avoiding false judgments. For the cynics, it was freedom from control or social convention. Stoicism, like its contemporaries, is a eudaimonistic philosophy. It offers a holistic conception of what the good life for humans is and how we can get there. This leads into the second key concept, which is virtue. So, if Stoicism is about achieving happiness, then the question becomes, what is happiness for the Stoics? What is eudaimonia in the Stoic view? What does it mean to have a good life? For the Stoics, it meant to possess virtue. Talking of virtue can sound moralistic or even Puritan, but the focus was not on being without sin or error, although this was a part of it. In Greek, the word for virtue is arete. This means excellence. Everything was thought to have its own unique arete, so it clearly doesn't have to do only with moral judgments. You could speak of the excellence of a house or argue about what makes an excellent book or play. When the Stoics say that happiness is found through virtue, they're saying that a good life is achieved by being an excellent person. The innovation here is that they're placing the responsibility for happiness within the individual. The Stoic says, if you want to have a great life, become a great person. Don't think the question of happiness is separate from the question of personal development. Virtue is necessary and sufficient for a great life. This leads to the third concept, which is knowledge, or in Greek, episteme. For the Stoics, the actual characteristic of virtue, what makes some humans excellent and others terrible, is knowledge. This was a controversial claim in ancient Greece and Rome, and it still is today. A person is not made excellent by their beauty, salary, or fame, but how much they know. An ignorant billionaire has a worse life than a wise beggar. There are two main arguments for this. First, anything is made excellent by perfecting its unique characteristic. We judge fish by how well they swim, because they are swimming creatures. We judge race cars by how fast they drive because that is what they were built to do. Humans are unique among other animals in our capacity for reflection and self-awareness. We are the only creatures that can make self-aware choices, and so what makes us excellent is to perfect that capacity. The second argument comes from observation. All terrible people display some kind of ignorance. They want too much, they think they're owed something they aren't, or they hate someone who doesn't deserve it. All great people display knowledge. They are the activist who knew the truth long before others recognized it, the head of state who understood the right thing to do in a complicated situation, the parent who knew their family had enough to be happy as long as they did the best they could to parent well. Great people, happy people in the Stoics' view, have knowledge. All bad people suffer from a kind of ignorance. The fourth concept is to live in accordance with nature. The Greek is Kata, Phusin, Zain. The goal of Stoicism is to achieve happiness through knowledge, as I just said. What this means in practice is what the Stoics called living in accordance with nature. When we are ignorant, misled, or misinformed about either ourselves or the world, there is a kind of tension or friction. We want things to happen a certain way. We expect certain outcomes. And when they don't happen, we get frustrated. We expect the world to match our expectations and are angry at it when it inevitably doesn't. The wise person doesn't do this. They live in accordance with nature. The Greek word for nature, physis, is where we get the modern English word for physics. It doesn't just mean trees and animals, although they are included, but rather the entire world. To live in accordance with nature means to live in accordance with the facts. You don't fear death because you know it's inevitable. You don't hate flawed people because you expect people to have flaws. To live in accordance with nature is to have a smoothly flowing life, like the Stoics tell us. It is to both go with the flow and to understand your own autonomy and capacity to change things when you can. So, to summarize so far, Stoicism is about achieving happiness. Happiness means virtue or excellence. Excellence for humans is knowledge. And living with knowledge means living in accordance with nature, achieving a smooth flow of life where you don't expect the world to be different than it is. You understand everything as it is and understand your role within nature as a part of that. So the next set of ideas, I think, are about how do we achieve that? How do we achieve living in accordance with nature? And that takes us to key idea number 5, which is mindful attention. The Greek is prosoche. For the Stoics, living well is ultimately a consequence of thinking well. So Stoic ethics, or their practical advice for becoming a better person, is mostly a set of tools for disciplined thinking, combined with rules and guidelines for the topics that are most important for living well. Thinking the capital of Canada is Toronto, or that you need your crush to like you back to ever be happy, are both false judgments. But the Stoics are going to be much more interested in the cognitive errors that lead to the kind of second mistake and how to think and how to fix them. That's because if I falsely believe I need my crush to like me to be happy, that's going to have a lot more significant implications for how I live, and how I experience life and whether I'm happy ultimately. The way to achieve knowledge in any domain, but especially in ethics, is through a process of mindful attention. The Stoics call this prosoche. Prosoche is essentially the idea that if you want to think better, you have to pay attention to how you think and what you are thinking about. You need to understand both the content of your thoughts and your thought patterns. When we live non-reflectively, we make mistakes. We judge prematurely. We form hard-to-shake preconceptions. We don't recognize contradictions or inconsistencies. The Stoic first and foremost pays attention. This takes us to the sixth concept, which is impression and assent. Greek is Phantasia and Synkatathesis. What the Stoic pays the most attention to are impressions. Phantasia in the Greek, the same word we get the English fantasy from. The world is filtered through our minds and presented to us. These representations of the world are called impressions. The Stoics recognize that our impressions do not necessarily accurately represent reality. I can make factual errors. For example, I can mistake someone in a busy restaurant for my friend and get pretty close to them before I notice my mistake. But I can also make moral errors. For example, I can be angry at someone because of the story I've made up to justify my actions, when really I'm the one who deserves blame. While false or misleading impressions are dangerous, we have the tools to address them. The Stoics argued that humans had a special ability to reflect on our impressions, something that makes us distinct from other kinds of animals. We don't have to believe our first impressions. We can interrogate them, question them, and we only have to believe the ones that stand up to our test. The Stoics called choosing to believe an impression assent. We assent to the impression as true, and it becomes a belief, something that guides our actions and becomes a part of us. The Stoics practice mindful attention to be sure they only assent to true impressions. This is how they live with knowledge. As Epictetus would say, our primary task as philosophers is to make proper use of impressions. Concept 7 is the things up to us. Greek, ta Eph Hemin. If the Stoics' task is to make proper use of impressions, how can we tell which ones are worthy of our assent? It's easy with factual errors, but more complicated with moral ones or value judgments. Who deserves to be praised or scorned? What situations deserve sadness or anger or jealousy? This is where Stoic theory comes in. The Stoic provides arguments for what kind of value judgments are right or wrong. The simplest rule of thumb is the dichotomy of control. Introduced by Epictetus, this is the idea that some things are up to us, to Eph Hemin, and some things are not up to us, and that only the things up to us deserve to be called good and bad. What is up to us are our choices and our character, and what is not up to us is everything else. If I'm angry at my friend for insulting me, that's a false impression I should not have assented to, because their words are not up to me. If I'm proud of myself for showing courage and kindness, this is something I should be proud of, because that was up to me. This is not the only Stoic tool for navigating impressions, but it is the most important one. If you understand what's up to you and what's not, and reject impressions that value or place a lot of importance on the things not up to you, then you'll already be progressing well. Concept 8 is the ruling faculty or the faculty of choice. In Greek, these are two different words. The ruling faculty is Hegemonikon, and the faculty of choice is the Prosoche. So the Stoics placed this importance on the things up to us because they saw our fundamental identity as being our minds, or at least close to it. We are not our reputations or our bodies or our nice possessions. We are the part of ourselves that thinks and feels and make decisions. We might today call this our minds or our souls. The Stoics called this either the ruling faculty, the Hegemonikon, or the faculty of choice, Prosoche. There's a small distinction between the two. The Prosoche is probably a little bit more restrictive and was the preferred term of Epictetus, but the idea is consistent enough. Good people are not those with nice bodies and big houses, because we are not our houses or our bodies. We are a thinking thing, a choosing thing. So we should be judged on and are made excellent by the choices we make. The things up to us, our choices, are what we should judge as good and bad, because they are what tells us about a person's quality. The things not up to us, our hairline, our clothes, our family name, don't tell us anything about the quality of a person or the happiness of their life. The ninth key concept is indifference. In Greek, that's Adiaphora. Indifferents are what the Stoics call the things that are not up to us. These are all the things that make up our lives besides our character. Money, reputation, power. Even our health or death are indifferents. They aren't good in the Stoic sense of the term, because they don't necessarily make our lives better. But they also aren't bad. We shouldn't reject possessions or sabotage our reputations. They are just indifferent, something to be detached from, things to neither desire nor fear. One way to think about indifference is that, on their own, they make no necessary difference to the happiness of our lives. Imagine if I told you there were two people. One was beautiful and rich and famous. The second was poor, ugly, and unknown. Who has a better life? Who is happier? The Stoic answer to that question is that there's no way to know. We don't have enough information because you haven't told us anything about their character, nothing about the quality of their ruling faculty or faculty of choice. You've only told us about indifference, but there are many rich people that are unhappy and many poor people that are happy. That is the concept of indifference. Something worth noting is that the Stoics did recognize indifferents are not all equal. Getting food poisoning is not the same as spending time with friends. The Stoics said some indifferents were preferred and others were dispreferred. This means that, all things being equal, it's natural to prefer health to suffering, life to death, popularity to isolation, money to poverty, and so on. We make a mistake when we think things like health, popularity, and money are necessary to be happy, but it is natural to prefer them. The 10th key concept is harmful passions and good emotions. In Greek, this is Pathe, which are the harmful passions, and Eupathe, which are the good emotions. To achieve knowledge, as we've discussed, you must be mindful of your impressions and carefully assent to what is true and false using Stoic theory as your guide. But this is more than just an academic exercise. The Stoics argue that our emotional lives depend upon the quality of our judgments. They had a cognitivist view of emotions, meaning that our emotions are not irrational responses to stimuli, but something constructed from our judgments and beliefs. I am angry at you for cutting me off in traffic because I judge that I have been harmed and you are to blame. If I'm not in a hurry, then I don't think I should have been harmed and the anger subsides. If I notice you're driving aggressively because you're having an emergency, then I don't think you're to blame for your actions either, and the anger subsides as well. The Stoics divided emotions into two categories. Passions, which they called Pathe, are intense feelings that come from false judgment, anger, irrational grief, jealousy, or envy. Good emotions, Eupathe, are feelings that come from true judgments, a feeling of joy for your friendship, a gentle caution not to make an unnecessary mistake. Our worst emotional experiences, the Stoics argue, are those intense passions that upheave our lives and come from ignorance. When we think our happiness depends on indifference, things which are necessarily outside of our control, then we have a tumultuous emotional life that's outside of our control as well. We are happy if our crush likes us back, but devastated if they don't. We're constantly afraid of losing what we have, but also desire more. This is the link between Stoic theory and the adjective Stoic, meaning cold or without emotion. Stoics are not without emotion. They can have Eupathe, good emotions that come from true judgments. But a Stoic, at least the Stoic who has achieved virtue, will not experience the kinds of disruptive passions that are so common and painful in our lives. When you think happiness depends on virtue, and you recognize that this is within your control, then there's much less to be disturbed about. So in summary, that is what I think are the 10 most important ideas in Stoicism. I think if you understand each of those, you're well on your way to understanding both Stoic theory, the foundation of why they argue what they argue about how to live well, and Stoic practice as well. So in summary, Stoicism is about achieving happiness or flourishing. That's Eudaimonia. For the Stoics, happiness is virtue. That's what a flourished life it looks like. It's one where you have virtue, which is human excellence. Virtue for the Stoics is knowledge, episteme, because we are thinking things. That's what it means for us to be excellent. When you live with excellence, you live in accordance with nature. So you're not fighting the way things are. You're living smoothly in accordance with the way things are. You understand the world and your role within it. To achieve that, we get into Stoic practice. Stoic practice begins, the most important thing of Stoic practice, in my view, is mindful attention, or prosoche. It's where you're paying attention to your surroundings. And what you're paying attention to, most importantly, are impression and assent. So you're paying attention to the impressions you receive, those first impressions of the world, and you're paying attention to how you assent to them, which ones you take as true or false. But we need a criteria to judge impressions. Which ones should I care about and which ones should I throw away? Well, that's where the dichotomy of the control comes in. The things up to us. So we should judge the things up to us as being important and should detach ourselves from the things not up to us. Why should we care about the things up to us more than things not up to us? Why should we disregard our bodies, our reputations, our wealth, at least compared to character and virtue? Well, because we are our ruling faculty, our faculty of choice. That's the thing that's up to us. And so we become better when we perfect the things up to us, when we improve the things up to us. It's not like our identity is in our body and it's not up to us, but we should still care about it. It's like we aren't our bodies. We are just this capacity to think and reflect well, our minds. So how should we navigate indifference, though? How should we navigate the things that are not up to us? Well, that's the Stoic theory of indifference. And the key there is that you recognize that they're not necessary to be happy, so you don't desire them, or you're not afraid of them in the same way. You care about virtue and vice, but you also recognize that some of them are preferred. You don't throw away your possessions for no reason, but you're also not grieved if you lose them in a fire. That's kind of the Stoic ideal. You're happy while you have them, but you're not sad if they go away. And whether or not we navigate our impressions correctly matters for the moment-to-moment quality of our lives, because it affects our emotions. So harmful passions, these intense anger, irrational guilt and grief, these are what come about when you make mistakes, you assent to the wrong impressions, and you care about the things that are not up to you. And then good emotions, kind of a gentle calm, a feeling of joy for the things that are up to you. That's what you feel when you make the right judgments about impressions. So those are the 10 key concepts. For my money, those are the most important ideas. Happy to hear from anybody listening. Did you think there was something missing? Do you think there's something more important? But I really do think, after all my time exploring Stoicism, that if you understand these 10 things, you'll have an incredibly, incredibly strong foundation. And if you're struggling with Stoicism, struggling to make sense of it, it's probably coming down to not understanding well enough one of these 10 things. And so returning to this list and going back over it in more detail might be something helpful for you. So I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for listening.